Look, I think I speak for most fans of the Mario RPGs when I say that the last year or so can be accurately summed up with, we are so back. Super Mario RPG getting a remake was a really nice out of left field surprise, but following that up only a few months later with a remaster for the 1000-year door of all things was about as unexpected as it was awesome. What easily made me the happiest and most excited though was the announcement of Mario and Luigi Brothership, because let me tell ya, I absolutely adore this series. These games were funny, charming, kinda weird at points, the music was spectacular, and as far as the combat goes, they were some of the most engaging turn-based RPGs I have ever played. The series' original devs, Alpha Dreams, sadly went bankrupt in 2019, and while I figured we'd still get a new game eventually, there was no real way of knowing when that would actually happen. So here we are 5 years later with the newest entry in the series being made by the lovely folks over at Acquire, and honestly, Brothership is straight up just one of my new favorite Mario RPGs. Like, don't get me wrong, I definitely have my criticisms with it, and I wouldn't even say it's my absolute favorite Mario and Luigi game. But the combat here is arguably the best in the series, and the story genuinely surprised me with how good it was. So join me while I tell you all about Mario and Luigi Brothership, one of my new favorite Mario RPGs. After an incident involving Luigi having been chased off of a cliff by bees, Mario and him are taken to Concordia, another world that had its main continent break apart into smaller drifting islands after the Unitree was mysteriously destroyed. Shortly after arriving in this new world, Mario reunites with Luigi on Shipshape Island, where they meet a botanist named Connie and Snoutlet, who's definitely not a pig in any way, shape, or form. See, after the destruction of the Unitree, Connie set out to restore Concordia after planting a new one on Shipshape Island, by linking all of the lighthouses on each of the drifting pieces of Concordia and lighting each of the 4 great lighthouses. However, doing all of that by herself is nearly impossible, what with Connie being a small child, so with Mario and Luigi being the heroes they are, and, well, really not having a choice in the matter, they help Connie and Snoutlet fix Concordia one island at a time. It's never that simple, though, because all the while, a mysterious man named Zacket with his minions, X, Ten, and Shun, who make up the Extension Corps, have been kidnapping people for unknown reasons, and Zacket himself, while unconcerned about our heroes, doesn't seem too keen on Concordia being restored. Now, prior to Brothership, I'd say the strength in the story for a Mario and Luigi game was always more with the fun writing and characters than the actual plot. Sure, these games absolutely told high-stakes stories with epic moments, but the focus was more on the comedic and quirkier or just charming aspects of the writing. The emotional side of things and character development wasn't something they put a ton of emphasis on, and while there was never anything wrong with that at all, this time around a Brothership decides to handle the story a bit closer to something like the 1000-year door. The game strikes more of a balance this time around on the more serious and character-driven plot and the funnier as well as quirkier bits of the writing, and honestly, I think Brothership's story is all the better for it. Plenty of characters get actual development in this, including some of the more long-time ones, like Bowser Jr., which really caught me off guard, but even going beyond that, the writing is just frankly better than ever. For reasons I can't go into, Connie is easily one of my new favorite characters in a Mario RPG. She's really great on the whole, and yes, part of why I like her is because her design is adorable. As for Snoutlet though, they're a really great partner character for the bros. He's equal parts funny as well as helpful, and while I don't know if they're my favorite partner in the series, he's right up there with Dreambert and how much I love him. Then there's the Idol crew, and while I don't want to go too in-depth in regards to them, I will say that these kids make for a really great group, and let me tell ya, they are troopers, and I greatly respect them for it. I also want to give a quick spoiler-free mention to Chilliam and Bernadette for having one of the cutest and most wholesome relationships I have ever seen in a fictional couple. Some people may find it a bit too cheesy, and I get that, but I absolutely love these two. That being said, I do have a couple of criticisms. For starters, and what's my only major criticism with Brothership, the opening first few hours are a little slow narratively and very slow mechanically. Now, an RPG needing a few hours to get its story rolling is something I'm kinda used to at this point. These kind of games, especially with longer ones, sometimes just need a bit of extra time, and so long as it's within reason and doesn't take too long, I'm cool with that. Really, if that was the only issue here, I probably might not have brought this up at all, but the more egregious problem for me is how long it takes you to get access to all of your options in combat. It takes about 2 hours for you to get your hammer and another hour after that to get your first bros attacks, meaning for the first couple hours of the game, you're locked entirely to just jumping on enemies, and it can make Brothership's opening hours kinda drag a bit. I'm also not crazy on Zacket as a villain purely for his personality. While I love the running joke of him caring so little about bonds and other people, he always gets everyone's name wrong because he just doesn't care enough to remember. Zacket's pretty boring outside of that. He's very robotic and kinda machine-like in the way he talks talks and goes about things, and while that's kind of fitting given his character, he ultimately lacks a lot of that extra charisma, quirkiness, or oomph Mario and Luigi villains usually have, but thankfully the extension core doesn't have that issue. Moving on though, as far as Brothership's presentation goes, I gotta say it looks really good. The game's art style is basically just a nicer looking 3D version of what the previous games did, and honestly, while it obviously does just look really nice, it also feels like a logical progression from them as well. Mario and Luigi are just so expressive here. It adds a lot more charm and even humor to the game. Like, look at Mario and Luigi's face after they see this man lick this old shark bone. This is hilarious. As for the game's soundtrack though, I think it's really nice. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's my favorite in the series at all, but there's a lot of really good songs here, like Lotta Coin Island's theme, All Sand Islands, and especially Ship Shape Islands, which is honestly one of my favorite songs in the game. In what might be a controversial opinion though, based on what I've heard other people say about this one, my favorite song in the game overall is definitely the boss theme. Aside from just sounding really good, I love that it kinda sounds like a fusion between a victory song and an actual boss theme, as if it's the game's way of saying that no matter how intimidating or strong the guy you're facing is, Mario and Luigi have already won, because this is absolutely not their first rodeo. And actually, on that note, as far as the gameplay goes, Brothership has probably the best combat in the series so far, with it having some really nice and cool ideas, as well as easily some of my favorite bosses. Before I get deeper into that though, I do want to go over the other aspects of the game first. Starting with the basics and our first difference compared to past games, Mario and Luigi no longer move as a unit like in the previous adventures. Luigi instead follows behind Mario and will jump all by himself when he goes over gaps and such. This way, when you have to do some platforming, you only have to focus on Mario, and for that reason, while I ultimately don't think this is inherently better or worse than what they did before, it's a change I personally like. Just like in the other games though, the bros will unlock new abilities for exploring as time goes on, with them being called bros moves this time around. We have the UFO for hovering over large gaps, the Bros Ball returns from Partners in Time to let you go in smaller spaces, and finally we have the Fire and Ice Flowers for doing exactly what you think. All of them will also get an upgrade eventually, which will let them do more things, like how the Bros Ball gets a dash for moving through strong winds and faster movement, which is exactly why out of all of them, this one's my favorite. As far as exploration goes though, Ship Shape Island is easily one of the most important aspects of the game, with it serving two purposes. For one, it's pretty much a hub world of sorts, with it allowing you to easily travel to any islands you've linked, with it even having shops for items and gear. Secondly, it's your way of getting to new islands as well as the smaller and mostly optional islets, which can have items, smaller puzzles, or just a butt-ton of enemies. You can even find the occasional reef as well to get rewards from a lady named Issa Rock. Just like every other island fragment of Concordia, Ship Shape drifts along the ocean currents, and while it's possible to control what current it travels on, it can't stray from them or go backwards at all. All in all, I like traveling in Brothership fine enough. It's a neat idea, and while I kinda wish you got access to faster sailing a bit earlier to speed up the early game a bit, I wouldn't say that's actually a problem at all. Really, it's more my own personal taste than anything. As for the islands themselves though, I personally really liked nearly all of them. Honestly, the only island I had any issues with was Jellyfish Island, but I genuinely can't say exactly why without spoilers, so I'll just say it's story related and leave it at that. As far as my favorites go, Bulbfish Island is a standout one for me, mainly because of how different it is to everything before and after, with you needing to solve the mystery of what happened to the island's bulbfish eggs before they'll let you link the island. Heat Freeze Island was great mainly for how many charming and funny moments there were on it during the story, and Lotta Coins Island was great, but similarly to Jellyfish Island, I sadly can't go into why. On a different note though, Brothership's the first game in the series to have full-on side quests, and honestly I kinda love the inclusion of them. Aside from just giving me more game to play, a lot of them had some really nice writing and even world building, as well as character development. Also, the rewards can be pretty worthwhile. A good chunk of them will just give you healing items in some way, but plenty will give you new pieces of equipment and even beans, which you can use to permanently upgrade Mario and Luigi stats. I don't really have a specific favorite amongst them, but I will give a shout out to the Mysterious Package side quest for just being funny, and the quests where you refight a harder version of one of the lighthouse bosses, both because they're great fights and because they have really great rewards. And on the note of fights actually, let's finally get into Brothership's combat. Just like usual, the game plays like a turn-based RPG, with an emphasis on skill and your party consisting of Mario and Luigi. When attacking, the bros will perform action commands to get more damage out of an attack, which usually consists of pressing the A or B button at at the right time depending on who's attacking, with the bros of course being able to dodge or counter an enemy by jumping or using their hammer by pressing their respective button. On a bit of a related note though, I'd be remiss for not mentioning the fact that they changed it so that Luigi selects his attack with A instead of B like usual. I wouldn't consider this an actual problem at all, since if this is your first Mario and Luigi game, you'll probably be fine, but as a longtime fan, Jesus Christ, did it mess up my muscle memory when attacking as Luigi for the first 5 or so hours. This time around though, Mario and Luigi's basic jump and hammer attacks do work a bit differently. When one of the other brothers are present and not downed, they'll both perform an attack combo instead for more damage. Now, aside from just making combat feel a bit more dynamic and just looking cool, I love that it makes the bros feel like even more of a team, and honestly, these two are about as tight-knit as a pair of brothers can get. It just makes sense and works perfectly with the game's overall theme of bonds. Unlike the basic attacks though, Brothership's bros attacks work exactly like how they did in every other game before outside of Superstar Saga. Mario and Luigi will get special items that'll allow them to perform special attacks together in battle, with each bro getting 5 each. Those of you who've played some of the past games will already be familiar with a few of these, because they actually reuse a few of the bros' attacks, like the Yoo-Hoo Cannon, Bomb Derby, which is easily one of my favorite attacks in the game, and the green as well as red shells. Though all of them have been updated in some way, like how the red and green shells are now single target and multi-target respectively. As for the new ones though, they're all pretty good, with one exception that I actually can't talk about or show you for story reasons. Hatch Me If You Can is a great way to deal a lot of damage to an enemy while also getting in some splash damage against every other enemy present. The Zapparator, while kind of a pain to get excellent consistently with from my experience, was a great AoE attack when you did, with it doing some pretty nice damage. Clock Out Blow though is easily my favorite bros attack in the game because of A, how visually cool it is, B, how hard it hits, and C, the fact that I feel like I'm making a JoJo reference every time I use it. On a different note though, Brothership introduces what I guess you could call its own version of the badge system from some of the previous games with the battle plugs, but honestly, while I loved the badges, these are way better than them. Unlike normal accessories or gear, the battle plugs are instead equipped to one of 2 slots on the power tap Mario and Luigi get, with the amount of equipable slots increasing as you go through the game, with it maxing out at 5. Nearly every plug does something different, like extra damage with possibility of inflicting status ailments, which were my favorite kind of plugs, your basic attacks doing splash AoE damage, and plugs that guarantee crits against certain enemy types. The beauty of this system is really in just how much variety it gives you in combat for strategies, with there being nearly 40 battle plugs in the game, with only 2 of them being additional copies of pre-existing plugs, with those being Kaboom Attack and Surprise Iron Ball. They can't be used forever though, since each one has a set amount of uses before they'll need to recharge for a certain amount of turns, with stronger plugs taking longer to charge than others. Now, as for how you get plugs, they can be obtained in some side quests, occasionally the main story, or by exploring, but most of them you'll have to craft yourself. See, on each island there will be a set amount of these little dudes called bulb sprites hidden in these glowing spots, and after a certain point in the story, you'll be able to use them to make new plugs. Thankfully, the game will let you know how many hiding spots are left on each island by checking on the island select screen, so you'll always know if you missed any at all. Having said all of that though, I've yet to mention one of my favorite things Brothership added to the gameplay, so now it's time we talk about Luigi logic. Every now and then, Luigi will get an idea of some kind, which can have him helping with collecting things or pulling objects, puzzle solving, story-related moments, or progression, and even boss fights. These ideas of his can range from pure tactical brilliance to him just being a witty little goober, and I absolutely love it. Aside from just being funny, like the one where he squeezes through a locked gate, these just add so much charm to Luigi and they make for a fun mechanic in boss fights. See, during said fights, there will come a moment where something will happen in the background that Luigi can take advantage of to stun the boss for a round and let the bros deal critical damage, with all of them having their own action command and in 1 or 2 cases being a sort of minigame. Which, on a related note, does bring me to the bosses themselves, and unfortunately some of my only other criticisms for Brothership. Now, don't get me wrong, the bosses themselves are really great on the whole, with a couple of them being some of my new favorite fights in the series and others being just good at worst. The issue isn't the quality so much as it is the quantity, because counting the optional bosses, Brothership has the second least amount of them in the series, and with this game being a nearly 40-hour-long adventure, at a minimum, you're really going to feel that at points. Like, I obviously can't go too deep into this because that would involve some pretty heavy spoilers, but I will say that it really can hurt the pacing a little bit in some parts of the game. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't even think the game needed that many more. Like, even just 2 or 3 more required fights here and there would have been perfect, really. And on another related note, I also need to levy a similar criticism against the enemy variety because, well, it's definitely not bad in any way, it could absolutely be better in some places. Like, you're gonna see a good few repeating enemy types throughout Brothership, like in the early game and with Zocket's Zoc Troopers. And while there are variations for some of them that are different enough, it doesn't really fix the problem. While my favorite Mario and Luigi game would have to go to Dream Team, Brothership is a close second and a wonderful new entry in the series, and an even more wonderful sign of things to come after such an insane year for Mario RPGs. As far as the story goes, despite the opening hours being so slow, Brothership honestly does just set a new standard for the Mario and Luigi games, with the cast easily being the best it's ever been and it having some of the best emotional writing in the series so far. The combat's better than ever thanks to the variety and strategies battle plugs give for fights, as well as the welcome addition of attack combos, and frankly, despite my criticisms for the amount of bosses, the quality for them is very good, both in presentation as well as gameplay. And honestly, I really hope Luigi logic becomes a staple going forward. It's such a fun and charming addition to the game, and I'd really hate to see it scrapped in future titles. I mean, really though, on the whole, Brothership is just great. For Acquire's first attempt at a Mario and Luigi game, they did a really good job, and I'm excited to, hopefully, see more from them in the future. Thank you all for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I hope you all have a nice day.